Good morning and welcome back to Tactics Board. Norwich City's away struggles just won't go away, but they're back at home this weekend facing struggling Rotherham United at Carrow Road, and it's a game which I think everyone is hoping to take 3 points from. Of course, the tactical task is made slightly more difficult by Borja Sainz's red card against Middlesbrough and the likely setup changes that means for David Wagner, but we're going to get stuck into that in Tactics Board, your tactics preview and predicted starting 11 for the game. So without further ado, this is the 11 I think Wagner will choose to help his side win against Rotherham United. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Jakob Sorensen and Ben Gibson at centre back, with Sam McCallum at left back, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean in the heart of midfield, with Christian Fasnacht on the right, Dimitris Giannoulis on the left and Ashley Barnes behind Josh Sargent. Up front, I only had a sort of settled 11 to pick from for a couple of games. I think I got it right twice, and then immediately, obviously, things changed. So there are a couple of things to discuss in there. Not really a debate to be had over Angus Gunn in goal. He's been excellent this season. Not much he could have done about that Middlesbrough defeat. I felt actually he was deserted at times by some really poor defending, some slow reaction times. And in that sense, I'm not sure Norwich will miss the Grant Hanley of maybe the last 2 or 3 games. I think he's struggled to get back into the game since he came back from injury, and he even admitted that, I think, in the pre-match programme for the Sunderland game. He's out with injury, which is, I suppose, a blow in terms of numbers, but I'm going to come on to why it might be a minor good thing against Rotherham United. At right back, I've got Jack Stacey, and he had to play a slightly different role after the red card against Middlesbrough. He was really tucked inside, and it was left to Christian Fasnacht to do the defending until half-time. And then after that, there wasn't really much defending going on out wide. The numbers there were sacrificed so that Norwich could try and have an outlet up front, and that did give Stacey quite a difficult job. So a tough one for him at Middlesbrough, but not loads he could have done, and I'd expect to see him at right back against Rotherham. And at centre back, I've gone for Sorensen and Gibson, and as I said, there are definitely some positives to that, although Sorensen maybe doesn't have the physical attributes that Hanley does. He's less likely to win the headers, and he might struggle a little bit against Jordan Hugill, who of course is that profile of defender who likes to get into tussles, and maybe Sorensen won't thrive against. But distribution-wise, he offers so much more than Hanley, and against a team that's going to be sat back in a low block that Norwich are going to have to break down with probably some slow passing at times, you'd say that him and Ben Gibson are actually a fantastic defensive duo to do that. You do feel a little bit for Danny Bart, of course, a centre-back throughout his career in the Championship team of the season last season, but for whatever reason, he just isn't fancied by Wagner, who actually cited the qualities of Sorensen at centre-back in terms of his quality on the ball when he chose him over Danny Bart earlier this season. And you'd expect, based on sort of recent decisions, including the one where Sorensen came on for Hanley at Middlesbrough, that it will be those two again in the heart of defence, Sorensen and Gibson. At left back, of course, we'll come on to the left wing decision and why I've gone that way, but because I've got Giannoulis at left wing, it doesn't really make any sense to choose anyone other than McCallum at left back, and I don't think there are any worries for Norwich there. I think he's been very, very good this season. You've heard it from me a few times. I'm a little bit like a broken record now on Sam McCallum. I feel that he's been maybe a little bit underrated, if not by the fans, then by Wagner at times, because I think he's offered a lot to Norwich. He can offer a lot in this scenario where they're trying to break teams down, because technically he is a very good footballer. Attack-wise, he can be very good, and I think he'll have an impact against Rotherham, and I'd be surprised if he doesn't start if my prediction for left wing is true, although I'm aware that's a very variable element. So I've gone for McCallum at left back. In the heart of midfield, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean. Of course, Kenny McLean will be taking the captain's armband again after Grant Hanley's injury, and the way that he spoke after the Middlesbrough game about Rotherham, you get the sense that they are wary of what happened at the New York Stadium, that they want to avoid that sort of slow start again, and maybe the issues that they had. Of course, Rotherham actually brought an end to Norwich's unbeaten start to the season in September. So they're definitely wary of that. McLean is at the heart of that, and with him and Gabriel Sara in the centre of midfield. Another fantastic assist, by the way, from the Brazilian on Wednesday. you'd say Norwich are in safe hands, especially in this sort of environment where they'll need to break teams down, where they'll need players sliding passes through. Sarah and McLean have been their two most reliable sources of that form of attack this season. So I've gone for those two in centre midfield. That would be an unbelievable shock if neither of those, or if one of those didn't start even. And on the right, I've gone for Christian Fastnack, Norwich's likely only recognisable winger for this game. Of course, I am filming this before the results of Norwich's appeal of the Science red card come back, but to be honest, I'd be very, very surprised if that comes back and his ban is rescinded. So it looks like he'll be out for 4 games, and Wagner does need to come up with this fairly short-term plan for dealing with that. But at the moment, Fastnack is the only winger he can really count on, and he'll be really, really hoping that there aren't any injury issues for him in this game. But yeah, that's sort of a choice by automation, and yeah, I'd be surprised if it's anyone other than Fastnack on the right, even if he has maybe struggled to produce the same output from the start of games that he has as a substitute. So I've got Fastnack on the right. On the left, Dimitris Giannoulis, and this is where the debate is had, really. A lot of various permutations of different situations. Of course, Liam Gibbs is somebody that Wagner has talked about as a wide option, and I think Fastnack has played a couple of times over on the left. It's been quite rare, and that was an option I considered in terms of moving Fastnack over to the left, having Gibbs on the right, where Wagner has used him as a substitute a few times. But I think Fastnack is somebody who Wagner's going to want to get the most out of, as Norwich's only, well, I was going to say natural winger. For me, he feels like more of a natural forward player, but Norwich's only career winger, the only player who's played there regularly. He's probably going to want to get the most out of him. He hasn't really had that when Fastnack's played over on the left. So while I see that as an option, I've just about gone for Giannoulis. There's also the opportunity maybe to move Sargent out wide, but I think the evidence of Ashley Barnes up front on his own for Norwich this season speaks for itself. And in fact, against Rotherham was where the warning signs were that maybe Barnes wasn't going to be as good as he had been alongside Sargent, because I remember him really, really struggling, getting frustrated, just barging into the Rotherham defenders needlessly, and those were the signs that maybe Sargent's injury would have a huge impact on Norwich's season. Of course, for the period that he was out injured, it did. So I would base on that evidence the fact that Wagner would probably be reticent to move Sargent out wide and use him on the left, although of course that was what happened for a little while at Middlesbrough. But you could tell from the fact that he just sacrificed having the wingers for the second half how desperate he was to have those two in tandem up front, even when he only had 10 players. So I would expect him to want to keep that duo up there, and then when you look around at that, there's only really one option that there is, and that's Dimitris Giannoulis at left wing, and he has done that before. I think in the Sunderland game, just to see it out, he had McCallum as the left back, he had Giannoulis as the left winger, and that did work on a sort of temporary basis. I think tactically the issue would be how different a fullback role is to a winger role for Wagner. At some clubs, basically a winger is just playing slightly higher up than a fullback. They mark the fullback rather than the winger, and other than that, the roles are fairly similar. But when you watch Borja Sainz on that left and Christian Fastnack on the right as well, and how much time they spend in the middle of the pitch, that's going to be a completely different role for Giannoulis if he does end up out there. He's not just going to be able to hover on the touchline, receive the ball down the line from McCallum and then whip balls in. He's going to have to get used to whatever Wagner wants from his wingers in terms of when they're in the middle of the pitch, the players that they're maybe drawing away from the wide areas, and the movement is going to have to be completely different for Giannoulis. So tactically, there's quite a lot to overcome in 2 or 3 days for that to be able to happen, but I don't really see what alternative he has when you break down the other options and the weaknesses and the issues that they provide. I think the more likely out of the other two scenarios is Christian Fastnack going over to the left and then Liam Gibbs going over to the right. But what I can see, and this is a very marginal prediction, is Giannoulis starting at left wing. But again, there are going to be issues with that. So it'll be interesting to see how they combat that and how they deal with that. But you'd say that this is a side that probably should have enough to beat Rotherham, with Barnes and Sargent up front and in tandem. Of course, the movement is going to be very good. It always has been when those two are there. And I think Sargent has struggled to maybe have the impact on the ball that he has earlier this season in maybe the last 3 games. Of course, he came up with that fantastic moment against Sunderland, but you'd like to see maybe a little bit more decisiveness in his play, a little bit more quality and technical ability in his touches. But you'd say against the team that are 24th in the league, even with the injury issues and the suspension issues that Norwich are set to face this weekend, they should have enough. Of course, it will be a deep block that at times Norwich have struggled against, but you look back at that Sunderland game, and they're a side that's sort of mid-table, and they tried to stifle Norwich and to sit back and deny them the opportunity to create chances, and they still did create a fair amount of chances, and if they had been more clinical, they probably could have come out bigger winners. Admittedly, it wasn't the most fluid performance of Norwich this season, so that doesn't necessarily bode especially well, but you feel that if they could get 3 points against Rotherham, as feels likely, to be honest, that it would give them confidence going forward that they can survive even amidst this sort of injury. I think I can probably label it a crisis at this point. Amid the issues that they face, I think this would give them huge confidence going into the rest of the playoff push. So hopefully we're back here talking about another Norwich City win next week on Tactics Board. Thank you for now for joining me. If you want any coverage, of course, of the game, go across to the Pinken channels. We've got pinken.com/subscribe. If you're not already a subscriber, go across to the rest of our social media accounts. Stay on this YouTube channel. There's plenty all over the place. So thank you for joining me here on Tactics Board. That's all my plugging done, and I will see you soon.